Now, on this edition of The Sages, we delve into the remarkable journey of Abdilatif Abdalla, distinguished professor, poet, revolutionary, and Pan-Africanist. Of course, he was born in Mobassa in 1946 in Kenya. Professor Abdalla's path from a young accountant to a global icon in post-colonial Africa's struggles is nothing short of extraordinary. I'm already excited because the man was imprisoned for his support of his union, that's the Kenya People's Union. He turned his time in solitary confinement into a creative force, producing the acclaimed collection of poems. I'm sure you've heard them now. Sauti Jadiki. Join us now via Zoom as we explore his resilience, his insights on Africa's political landscape, and his vision for the future of Pan-Africanism and creative activism. Is Professor Abdilatif Abdalla. Prof, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for that very generous introduction. In fact, I was not aware of some of the things you just described about me.
Oh,
I didn't make myself that way.
It is the decision of the masses to determine that you are an extraordinary person. I will come to talk about the achievements that corroborate it. But first, right. Some are still wondering today. Today, we celebrate you in very different capacities. You are a global icon by all standards and qualifications. But how did a man who started off as an accountant become a global icon in areas that are very little to do with income and expenditure?
Yeah. Well, I think maybe circumstances made me to be what I later became. To start with, with my education, for example, my formal education ended at primary school, which is at grade 7. And I failed my final examination, in fact. And after that, I didn't go back to school. In fact, I refused to go back to school. My elder brother, Sheikh Abdullah Nasir, whom I think we'll talk more about later, because he's the one who, in fact, who was my mentor, is my elder brother, but he was also my mentor. He tried very hard to take me back to school, but I refused. And the reason I refused is that because I was angry. In my primary education, my primary school, the numbers 1 up to 4, I mean, there were 4 students, those numbers belonged to us. We were the ones, who, in the exams, we occupied those numbers. Now, in the final exam, I was told that I failed it. So I said, well, there's no use in continuing with this education then. So I refused to continue. Okay, as a result, since this brother of mine, failed to have me back to school, what he did was that because himself was a former teacher and he was also a former politician, he was a political activist himself as well. He was involved in the independence struggle for Kenya. He also became the member of Legislative Council later on, but after independence, and when he saw things going wrong, and he lost interest in politics, and he left. But him being a former teacher, and at home there were lots of books, so he guided me on what to read.
Okay.
So since I refused to go back to school, so what I did was that he used to give me books to read. So it was a guided reading, in fact. And this is how I came to know the little I know now. And he, in fact, is the one who also instilled the love of reading books. He's the one. So the bug beat me there. Now, so I continue to read books, guided books, as in mostly political books, religious books, and things like that. When I failed my exam, I had to start looking for something to do, for a job. And the job which I got was a clerical job at the Mobassa Municipal Council. That was in 1965. That was 2 years after Kenya got independence. So I became a clerk at the municipal council there. That's where I worked. In fact, when I was arrested, I was still working as a clerk at the Mobassa Municipal Council. So that's how. In fact, it was a job which I got first. And I had no choice but to take it. So I became an accounts clerk first. That was my very first job, yes.
This book of poems, that is astonishing to many people. They did not know that you actually wrote it in solitary confinement. And it is astonishing because it was not pretty much known that you had a long history of actually studying literature and the poetry and the creatives in ways that many who write with the competence that you write actually went through. Now, tell us about that journey. In any case, how come Jomo Kenyatta was that opposed to the Kenyan People's Union in the first place?
Now, before I answer that question, I think I would like to add something to my first response. And this is especially for the young people. What I would like to tell young people is that education is not obtained only in the classroom. In fact, I've always been telling my students when teaching at the universities, I always tell my students that education, one gets education outside the classroom, not in the classroom. In the classroom, you're only given guidance on how to obtain that education. But you get your education outside the classroom by reading, lots of reading, that is. And that is how, as I said, that's how I got my education through self-education, that is. So I learned most of what I know through reading. And this is why, therefore, I would urge and advise young people that they should not be satisfied with what they get in the classroom. Once the teacher has given you the guidance on how to go about your subject, once you are out, read more and more and more about what you have been taught in the classroom. Now, how did I come to first? Let's say, because I wouldn't have written that book, so I think if I were not imprisoned.
Interesting.
Now, perhaps I would not have. Now, I became interested in politics. I mean, there's no way, in fact, I could have avoided that, because I come from a family, a very political family. In fact, we have a long stretch of history in the resistance against foreign and local domination, or rather misgovernance. When I grew up as a youth, I grew up in that environment, even in the family itself. As I told you, my elder brother, who was my mentor, he himself was a political activist during the independence struggle. So after he got disappointed with what was taking place in independent Kenya, he sort of passed the baton to me. Again, through what he gave me, through the books which he gave me to read, most of which were political. So it was as if he was training me to take that position which he left while he was in the independence struggle. Now, I became involved. I was politically aware already at the age of 19. And when Kenya People's Union was formed, KPU, and in fact, KPU was formed as a result of the dissatisfaction of what was the new government, the independent Kenyan government was doing. The founder and the leader of Kenya People's Union was himself the first vice president of Kenya. Jomo Kenyatta was the president, and then Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who is the father of Raila Odinga, who is now famous in Kenya, he was the vice president. So he, while in the government, when we got independence, when he started to see things going wrong, he and his other colleagues tried to change things while they were in the government. When they saw that they were not succeeding, and Kenyatta and his ilk were not listening, So he decided to resign from the vice presidentship, and this new party, or the first opposition party, Kenya People's Union, was formed. He became the leader of that party. Now, I was attracted to the policy of this party. Kenya People's Union had socialistic leanings. I wouldn't say that it was a socialist party, but it had socialistic leanings. And it was more concerned about the people and how to lift up the lives of Kenyans, especially after independence, and so that Kenya can become truly free, and so that we can govern ourselves instead of continuing to be governed, or rather to be controlled by the former colonialists. Now, of course, Kenyatta and his group were of the different opinion. Later on, we came to learn. I mean, when we were fighting for independence, they were very militant about having Kenya free. But once they got the independence, they forgot all that and started instead. They in fact they were just continuing to do what the colonialists used to do. One of them was amassing wealth instead of the wealth being distributed to Kenyans generally to uplift them economically. This small group in the leadership started to amass wealth for their own personal benefits. Now, those were one of the things which Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was very much opposed to, because the wealth in Kenya, we believe that should be shared to the Kenyans, to Kenyans generally. Now, therefore, I became a member of this party after being attracted by its policies. Now, Kenya People's Union was formed in April 1966. That is 3 years after Kenya's independence. Now, it was a duly legally registered political party, but the government didn't allow it to operate freely. In fact, its leaders were harassed. It was not allowed sometimes even to hold public meetings. Now, some of us young people then, decided that now we have to devise other means of confronting what is happening in our country. And we decided to start underground activities. Now, I became involved in that. Since the party could not reach the people through public meetings, so we decided that one of the means which we could use was to pamphleteering. So my task, one of the tasks which I was given, was to write pamphlets every month to explain its policy and also trying to criticize the government where we thought was going wrong. Now, this is what I did, and this is what, in fact, what sent me to prison. I managed to do that for past 6 months without being known, because the thing was being done clandestinely, secretly, written secretly, published secretly, and then distributed secretly. I managed to do that for 6 months, and then the 7th month, the 7th pamphlet, which I called Kenya Twendapi, Kenya, where are we heading to? That is the one which put me into prison. And it was mostly because of one of my colleagues, my political activist, fellow activist, betrayed me. He is the one, in fact, who informed the government that it was me who was writing those pamphlets. And it was because of his evidence in court, the government could find me guilty. So I was imprisoned because of that. Now, I faced 7 counts, 7 charges, in fact. The first of which was the conspiracy to overthrow the government by force of arms. And if I had been found guilty on that count, the penalty was death.
Oh, it was a treasonable offense.
But thank God, I don't know how I managed to do that, but I won 4 of those counts, of those charges, including the main one. And I had to defend myself because the government intimidated all the lawyers not to defend me, so I had to defend myself.
Oh, so you represented yourself in court?
Exactly. I had to defend myself. I knew nothing about law, and but I just don't know where I go to.
I was able to dismiss. I was able to dismiss 3 counts, including
4
one
counts.
that could have given you a life sentence or even death anyway.
Yes. So they found me guilty on three counts, and they sentenced me to prison. Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting episode in your life. When you look back, would you have still been interested in doing something like that at the risk of your life fighting for a cause?
Yeah, you know, and this is very important. I think I would like the young political activists to take note of this. One of the most important things when you are involved in political activism is that you have to believe in what you are doing. That what you are doing is right, and also you have to be ready to face the consequences, whatever they might be. And here again, I was lucky. This elder brother of mine again, when I was involved in these activities, especially when I wrote this last pamphlet, because I used to give it to him, being my mentor, to read it, to advise me on what I'd written. In fact, in this last pamphlet, he warned me. He told me, this time you are not going to escape the wrath of the government. So what he advised me was that, he said, change the language, change the tone of this pamphlet. This is going to land you into a big problem. So being a young man, hot-headed, I refused. I said, this is what I've written is what I believe. I'm not going to change even a single word here. So the good thing about him was that he was a person who he would advise you on what to do, but he would not force you to do what he wants you to do. So what he asked me was that, well, if this is your conviction, well, I'm telling you, this time you're not going to escape. You're going to fall into hot water. So, but this is what your conviction is, fine. But do you know what the consequences would be? I told him, well, I think I know. And then he wanted me to spell out exactly. He wanted to make sure that I really understood the consequences. So I told him, I think, well, if I'm not lucky, they will kill me. And if I'm lucky, they will imprison me. And then he asked me, are you ready for that? For those two consequences? I said, I think I'm ready. So his last word was that, okay, if that is your conviction and you truly believe in that, and if once they start putting you into problem, you won't abandon your conviction, then you have my blessings. Go forward. But if you have even an iota of doubt in your heart that once they start to put you into problems, you will abandon your conviction, then better abandon it now. So that promise which I gave him being my mentor, that gave me a lot of strength, even when I was in prison and facing all those tortures and things like that. That gave me. So therefore, what important gave me the strength. Therefore, what is important is to believe in what you're doing. Once you believe in what you're doing, consequences don't matter. Really, they don't matter. They don't matter. You will have the courage and the endurance to persevere whatever you go through after that.
Even when it included torture, like in your case?
I'm sorry?
I'm saying, you said the consequences wouldn't matter, and I'm asking, right, even when it included torture, like in your case.
Right.
Where did you get the strength to survive all the time in prison?
As I said, I mean, one of the things I think which really helped me a lot was that I didn't have any regrets. I didn't regret at all for what I did. And in fact, I was telling myself that if I come out of prison alive, and if the situation has not changed in my country, I will continue with the activism. So I didn't have any regret. That helped me a lot. In fact, there were three things which helped me to endure and survive the prison life, which I was in through. The first thing is that my conviction that that I didn't have any regrets. I didn't regret at all what I did. Second was my Islamic faith. You know, in Islam, you are taught to fight injustice wherever it is. And that also in Islam, one of the biggest sins is giving up hope.
Okay.
Because by giving up hope, is that it means that even God himself cannot intervene. You see? So giving up hope in Islam is one of the big sins. Right? Now, I didn't give up hope on that. I believe that one day things will change in my country. It doesn't matter how long it will take. And the third thing which helped me was this writing, my poetry.
Okay.
That was very therapeutical to me. It helped me a lot in going on and continue to survive what I went through there. So these three things really were the ones which helped me a lot.
How long were you in incarceration?
I would say that the biggest one was this, that I didn't regret. I didn't have any regrets.
Very well. How long were you in incarceration?
I was in prison for 3 years. In fact, first I was sentenced to only 1.5 years imprisonment on those 3 charges running concurrently. But then the government appealed against the sentence, saying that it was inadequate. So I was sent back to the court. And then it was increased to 3 years imprisonment. Now, again, the Minister of Interior those days, he gave instructions to the prison that I should serve the whole 3 years, because normally I should have served only 2 years, because normally you used to get 1/3 remission of your sentence. Okay. But the instruction was that I should serve the whole 3 years and that I should be kept in solitary confinement. So I spent all those 3 years in solitary confinement, locked in a cell, no connection with the outside world. Even the warders who are guarding me are not allowed to talk to me. But later on, anyway, I managed to befriend 2 of them who became very helpful. In fact, they are the ones who used to smuggle my poems out of prison, to take them out of prison, and then they were kept, and then they were published after I was released. So yeah, so that's that's how I spent 3 years in solitary confinement. From 1960, I was arrested in 1968, December, and sentenced in March 69, and I was released in March 1972.
Now, when you look back, do you think there are young Kenyans today who understand the kind of struggle you had to go through and are willing to do the same for causes like what you fight for?
I think, I think here the environment, political environment helps a lot. It depends upon in which political environment one has grown up. I, for one, again, as I said, I got involved in political activism just a few years after Kenya got independence. Now, if you look at the environment then, and I think it was the same in many African countries, the environment there was full of this urge and need to bring about changes, especially coming out after colonialism. The environment was that many people wanted to change things for the better.
Okay.
That was the environment I grew up in. So I could not escape that. That apart from nationally, and also, as I said, at home, I was surrounded with that type of
people who were into
environment, through my peers and my So I think when I compare that period to now, many African countries, I wouldn't say all, but in many African countries, I'm so sad to find that young people don't have that, not as much as they should have. But again, it's partly because they are in a different environment now, where people believe that now we are governing ourselves, which we are not, of course. If you look at it, we are not ruling ourselves. We are still being ruled by the former colonialists. this is what we are in that stage, which is called neo-colonialism. But many people believe now, we are ruling ourselves. This year we have independence, which is not independence in the real sense, really. So many young people, maybe, and also nowadays there are a lot of things which distract young people from engaging themselves politically, especially with political activism, which has to be done in order to change things for the better. There are so many attractions here nowadays, which we perhaps as young people didn't have, and therefore didn't perhaps, we're not scared of losing. We had nothing to lose.
Okay.
Whereas many young people nowadays, they have so many things which they are scared of losing, thinking that, if I get involved in political activism, if I'm arrested, and then I'll lose all that what I have and things like that. So I think it mainly depends on the political environment.
Now, the other question is related to the time it is being said that Daniel Arap Moi attempted to bribe you. I mean, a test of your character, some may say, right. But what does this really say about the period you were in and the times and the things you had to withstand to stick to your convictions?
Right. Now, after my release from prison, as I said, I had not changed my political stance and nor my conviction. I still believe that we have to continue with the struggle. Now, when I came out of prison, I continued to criticize the government. In fact, I lost many friends. There were times when I went and met with friends, for instance, who normally back home, people after work, they would sit together perhaps and have tea together either in a restaurant and things like that, or just on a baraza. So when I went and joined those whom were my friends, knowing that I still continue to criticize the government, I would see people leaving one by one. They didn't want to be seen to be with me or to be associated with me. But that didn't stop me. I continued to. Now this elder brother of mine, Sheikh Abdullah Nasib, he called me again this time. What he told me was that if you cannot keep your mouth shut, because this time, if they arrest you again, they'll make sure. The last time they tried to use the law to kill you, but fortunately enough, you won that charge, whose penalty was death. But this time, if they arrest you again, they'll make sure that they kill you, even extrajudicially. So if you cannot keep your mouth shut, better leave the country. Now, this time I listened to his advice. Now, and one of the reasons that after my release from prison, nobody wanted even to employ me. Now, the condition those times, when you tell people this time that some of the people, especially young people, they find it strange. But in those days, I mean, to be opposed to the government was literally a death sentence because so many things were, I mean, you had so many obstructions, and one of them was that nobody wanted to employ me. Here I was, unemployed. Fortunately enough, there was a vacancy at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. I applied for that, not being sure whether I will get the job, because it required somebody with a university degree, which I didn't have, as I told you earlier. My formal education ended in primary 7. So I applied for that job, and I was called for the interview. Unfortunately enough, I was offered the job as a research assistant in the Institute of Kiswahili Research. So I left Kenya I was released in March 1972, And I left Kenya in August 1972 to take this position at the University of Dar es Salaam. And so I worked there for my first 7 years of exile were in Dar es Salaam, in Tanzania. In total, I was in exile for 22 years. After I left Kenya in 1972, I could not go back home for 22 years because while outside, I continued to be actively engaged in opposition politics. Not so much while in Tanzania, so for obvious reasons. So after my contract finished in Tanzania, after 7 years, I could not continue to work there because the law then, I don't know whether the law has changed now, was that if you are not a Tanzanian citizen, you could not work for more than 7 years. The university wanted me to remain there, and then they even offered to apply a certain Tanzanian citizenship for me so that I could continue to work there. But there I was in a quandary, because if I had taken the Tanzanian citizenship, I would have automatically lost my Kenyan citizenship, and with it, the right to intervene politically in Kenya.
Yeah.
So I declined. I said, thank you so much for the offer, but I cannot do that because I would still want to be actively engaged in my Kenyan politics. So fortunately enough, I had gotten a job in London with the BBC Swahili service. So I took that job.
There's a question. There's
a
question about how a revolutionary Pan-Africanist appears to be in bed with an institution at the core, some say, of neocolonialism at the time. I'll come to that question. That's after this short break.
Right, okay.
Welcome back. My guest tonight is a man of extraordinary history. He's a freedom fighter, a Pan-Africanist. He's in the best shape of it. He went to jail for his convictions, came out of jail, was in exile, and still did not lose his convictions. Let's not get it wrong. He is a professor, but he's not one of those people who's beginning in education style on a rosy note. In fact, he left at primary school, it's a primary 7 or so, and never proceeded beyond that. I am having a conversation on the sages with Professor Abdilatif Abdalla. Prof, you're welcome back.
Thank you very much. In fact, I forgot. I should have corrected you right in the beginning when you were introducing me. I'm not a professor. You repeated that there. You cannot have a professor who finished just primary school.
Oh,
and didn't continue.
You are a professor in our hearts. We believe in your competence and abilities, really. Now, let me put this in perspective. We're talking about higher education.
Right.
And it's important because, I brought in the BBC parts. How did a revolutionary end up with the BBC?
Right.
Something that on the face of it may sound contradictory.
Right. Very valid question. It's true, the BBC, if you look at why the BBC was founded, after all, it was founded as a colonial entity, as a colonial instrument to control the thoughts of those who are listening to it, so that they shape their thoughts according to what the British government wanted. But the principles or the foundations of any institution cannot be subverted. You can still use a particular institution whose goals and objectives are different from yours, but still you can use that. You can subvert the objectives or the goals of that institution to work for you. I cannot say that one can do that 100%, but you can manage to do that. And I can give you some examples. When we were working as a broadcaster at Swahili service, for example, the news in the BBC is sacrosanct. The dissemination of news is sacrosanct. Okay. In fact, as a result, we used to receive our news bulletin from the newsroom, and you could not tamper with that. But now they came in English, and you had to translate them. Now, you as the translator, you can work wonders with it.
I get you.
I'll give you one example. In those days, South Africa was fighting for
apartheid, independence
against apartheid. Now, you receive a news bulletin from this newsroom saying that the South African terrorists attacked a particular installation, for example, a government installation, using Soviet made weapons. See, now you will think that that's very innocent, but there's a propaganda there already. Okay, first calling those freedom fighters terrorists. Secondly, that they are using Soviet-made weapons. Now, remember those days? There was this still Cold War going on.
Cold War, yeah.
Therefore, you are already telling the listener that these people are bad, they are terrorists. Secondly, they are using the weapons supplied by a very bad country, Soviet Union. Okay? Now, you know as a translator, to circumvent that, and this is what some of us who are progressive working there did, was that first we never translated the word terrorist for a Swahili word, for equivalent of Swahili word, which is gaidi. Now, instead, you just said, you translated mpiganaji, a fighter, which is neutral.
Okay.
See? So the South African fighters said the South African fighters attacked, and then Soviet supplied weapons. We just don't translate that. Just because if you look the other way around, for example, Israel, if Israel attacked the Palestinians or Palestine using American supplied weapon in the news bulletin, that will not be mentioned. They wouldn't say that it's American supplied weapon. So if you cannot mention it here, why do you mention it here? Now, if you are politically aware, you will see these traps and propaganda. So you can
navigate yourself through it.
Secondly,
yes.
Secondly, we use the BBC a lot for our political activism in Kenya. Because apart from being a news reader, I also had an arts program for the 7 years which I worked there. I used to present an arts program, which was devised by myself. So I could again influence by having the time of the kind of topics which are discussed in this, and inviting personalities who share the progressive ideas and revolutionary ideas. So you can. I mean, if you are politically aware, you can still subvert that type of institution. I must admit that you cannot fully succeed there, but at least you can make some contribution for the good of the struggle, in fact. So that is my brief answer to that.
No, I think that's a very poignant point to make there. I mean, you use the tools available for you, even if they appear to be contradictory on the face of it, to achieve the ends that ought to be done. Effectively and perhaps efficiently subsequently, that history will come to judge the truism of the impact of that on the ground. But Prof, there's another question that is on the minds of many.
Yeah, first, you asked me one question which I haven't answered yet.
Okay.
About Moi trying to bribe me.
Yes, there are more incidents, yes.
Right.
And
now,
conviction
after
that's
I
required.
left Dar es Salaam, when I moved to London, that is when I became more involved, because as I said earlier, for obvious reasons, I couldn't do as much in Tanzania, considering most of our governments, African governments and African leaders, defended each other and supported each other. I'm not saying that President Nyerere was in favor of what is taking place in Kenya, but because of the legal and constitutional restrictions, they could not allow opponents of Kenya to be openly active against their governments in Tanzania. So whatever I did in Tanzania, it was very secretly, not openly. But once I moved to London, again, taking advantage of this relative freedom, which is there. It's relative freedom. It's not completely, it's not a complete freedom, but again, you can make use of it. That's when I become more active. And especially after the coup attempt, the military coup attempt, which took place in 1982 in Kenya, whereas, thank God, the military didn't succeed, because although we were opposed to the government, but we didn't want to have a military government. And especially looking at the experiences with some of you brothers in West Africa had with military governments, we didn't want to have one there. So we were happy that it did not succeed. We wanted it to be democratically changed, the situation. So, but once the coup attempt failed there, the government became more repressive. Many people were arrested, many people were killed. So I was in London then, that was 1982. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who was teaching at Nairobi University, had come to London to launch his new book. So while there, this coup attempt took place. He was advised not to go back, so he was stranded in London. Now, me and him didn't know each other before. We only knew each other through our writings. But there were other Kenyans as well. There were other 5 Kenyans whom we mutually knew. We just got together, the 7 of us, and we said, now we have to do something about what is happening in Kenya. We should not just keep quiet. We started to organize. So we started with this, the Committee for the Release of Political Prisoners in Kenya, which we formed in 1982, in order to fight for those who are arrested after this coup attempt. Because, as I said, many university students, especially from Nairobi University, who came out in the streets to support the coup attempt, were arrested and killed. Many politicians were arrested, many journalists were arrested. So we formed this committee to fight for the release, for their release. Now, this committee was not solely of Kenyans. There were Kenyans, we Kenyans were the ones who came with the idea, but it was, the members came from different nationalities. Yeah. So we had that committee for 5 years, and we worked together for 5 years. After that, we thought now we need a political movement, because this was a human rights movement which had limits in what it could do to intervene politically in Kenya. So we thought now we need to have a political organization now, and we formed our first externally based movement called United Movement for Democracy in Kenya. Now, we who are outside, having formed this externally based movement, were in support of the internally based underground movement in Kenya called Mwakenya, which is an Swahili acronym for the Union of Patriots for the Liberation of Kenya. Now, during our activities, as I said, we were only 7 of us. But the government in Kenya thought we were so many, but we weren't. Because of the work we did, people thought that we were so many of us, but we were only 7 of us. Now, the government tried tried its level best to silence us. In fact, it even once sent the Minister of Kenya's Minister of Foreign Affairs to Britain to try and persuade the British government to expel me and Gugi from England because of what we were doing. But the government refused that request because they said we were not doing anything illegal there. So now the other device which the government used was that to try and divide us now. So therefore, there was a time when an emissary came from Kenya government to London to talk to me and to try and win me away from these activities, telling me that first, because they played the tribal card first, because in those 7 people, 4 of them belong to one community, Kikuyu community. The 3 of us, the other 3 of us belong to different communities.
Okay.
So they came and tried and played this tribal card, that these Kikuyus want to overthrow this government because it's not the Kikuyu who is leading it. Moi was not a Kikuyu. And then they said that if you agree to that, if you won't continue with the activities, then the government will allow you to come back home, because as I told you, I was in exile for 22 years without going back home. And also that you just say what you want, and the government will be ready to offer it to you, if you abandon this. So I told that emissary, no, I'm not interested in that. I'm not in this struggle for any material gains. If the government changes the way it's running the government, running the country, and if we are satisfied with that, I mean, you won't have to tell us to not to continue with the struggle. We'll just stop. So when that didn't succeed, after a while they sent another person again, and this time it was somebody who was close to me a relative of mine, in fact.
Oh, I see.
Thinking that he might persuade me, but again, even with him, he failed. So yeah, so it was that way. They tried to lure me and bribe me in that way, but I refused. I stood my ground. Yeah.
Is politics of conviction worth it? Does it pay? When you reflect back at all the years of your activism and the things you have done, possible impact on you, and even family life, is it worth it?
Very much so. Very much so. The fact that, I mean, if for only one thing, that I didn't abandon my conviction. It was very much worth for, because I don't think that I would have forgiven myself if I had changed from what I believed in and abandoned it. And yeah, no, it was worth it. It was worth it.
But the left in Kenya is not doing well. The left
I'm
in
sorry?
Kenya, I'm saying that the left of the political divide in Kenya is not doing well.
Yes. It isn't. It isn't.
It is not carrying that torch of fire and leading Kenya the direction that's supposed to be. Why do you think that's the problem?
I think one of the lazy answers is that I think the progressives in Kenya are not as united as those whom we are trying to fight against. Those who are in power and those who wield the means, the economic means in Kenya, are more united because they have something to defend, which they don't want to lose. Whereas the progressives, I think up to now, I'm sorry to say this, we have not managed to be united. And some of us, unfortunately, became co-opted into the governments which came after that, after all this struggle. There are many of our comrades whom we were together in the struggle. After the introduction of the multi-party system in Kenya in 1992, some of them joined or formed opposition parties, and some of them joined the government, and they're now talking a different language. I remember when I talked to some of them whom we were together in the struggle, I mean, they say openly, said, well, the situation has changed. We should now try to change things from within, which is a joke. I mean, those who are in power, they will the power, and they know how to preserve it. I mean, they won't allow any outsider to come in and change the situation. So it's a fantasy that. But anyway, that's how, unfortunately. And up to now, especially after the crackdown and after the introduction of the multi-party system, the left and the progressive became disorganized, and up to now there have not been attempts, unfortunately, to try and reorganize. And this is something which is needed, really, because there's still a lot of work which needs to be done in Kenya to achieve the objectives which we had set ourselves for in the beginning.
That's not the only place there appears to be massive failure compared to the hope that was given so many years ago. Pan-Africanism itself on the continent, it's not doing as well as many would have thought. In all fairness, indeed, in Nkrumah's book, Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism.
Yeah.
But even today, some will still argue heavily that Africa has not been rescued from the neocolonialist trappings. That's still very much visible on the continent today.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned Nkrumah, and the situation which we are in, I mean, vindicates Nkrumah, because as you remember, he very much advocated that we should form the African Union instead of having this separate governments in separate countries. But as again, because of this new gained independence, many of those who are leading the political parties had the plans of their own, as I said earlier, and it was to gain power, to hold power. And once they tested that power, and this is what Nkrumah warned against, once they tested that power, they didn't want to listen to any about African Union thing anymore, because they believed, and I think rightly so, that it would diminish their control, or it would diminish the power they had in their separate countries. So unfortunately, this is where we are now. Now it needs there's a need for Pan-Africanists, and unfortunately, I think there isn't much being done at the moment. I remember the last Pan-African Congress we had was in 1994.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I don't know whether, I was told that there was another one in Ghana which took place, but I don't know which year. But we haven't done anything yet to try and revive the spirit, which is still in great need, really, Pan-Africanism. So I think it's upon, well, we are getting old now. We are old already. It's upon the young people, I think, and again, they should be inspired by some of us who believe in that. so that they can take the mantle and try to try and bring about this. So Pan-Africanism, I think it should be one of our main things which we should. I'm encouraged, in fact, what is taking place in some of the Western countries, West African countries. I hope they will survive. What is taking place in Burkina Faso, what is taking place in Mali, I consider they're trying to do something to change the status quo and bring about the politics of change.
But they are riding on the back. They are riding on the back of unconstitutional overthrow of governments.
Right. Yes, I agree with you. But sometimes, you know, I think you have to disrupt things in order to construct something.
Interesting. Very interesting. It's an interesting development.
As long as the objectives are right.
Okay.
And that's why I said I hope they will continue with that, because we have seen so many of them. I mean, who came with very good ideas, very right-minded objectives, and then suddenly once in power, again they forgot everything, that they behaved completely differently. So that's why I said I hope after learning through all of these mistakes which we did in the past, they might perhaps hold the banner and others will follow. And the important thing is that, again, the young people really need to be interested in this, in Pan-Africanism, and to be made to be interested in it, really. It's, again, partly, again, upon us who are old and who have been through this thing to try and urge the young people and inspire the young people towards this goal.
Yeah. Do you think we'll achieve continental African unity anytime soon?
Not soon. Not soon. Not soon. It will take decades, perhaps.
Oh, wow.
It would have been easier. Yes, it would have been easier if people had listened to Nkrumah. Okay. I think it would have been easier then. But now that these people have tested power, it's not easy for them to abandon it. It will take time again if, and only if, because work has to be done. You cannot just sit idly by and expect that for it to happen. It won't happen. People have to work for it. And that's why I said young people have to be inspired to continue with this struggle. But it will happening. I think it will happen.
On the global stage.
We continue to work for it. Yes.
I
don't lose hope, as I said earlier.
Okay, that's interesting. On the global stage, though, we have Ukraine. We have what's happening in Gaza. It appears that a lot of strife and a lot of difficulty around.
Right.
Is there a way forward for this world? Is geopolitics heading the right direction?
Yeah. You know what? People thought that the Cold War had ended, but it hasn't. The Cold War is still very active. It has gotten hot, in fact, now. It's no longer cold. So the forces are still there, opposing forces. And again, just as we in Africa, especially the progressive people in Africa, have somewhat become so, I don't know, disinterested or what? Because, as I said earlier, we don't see any progressive activities taking place in Africa. If you look globally, again, you ask yourselves, where are all these leftists who used to be there in the past? I mean, with what is taking place in the world? But again, some signs have started to appear, and especially with what is happening in Palestine, with these young people, albeit in American universities, who started this campaign against the war there. These are type of the activities which I think should be harnessed and globally, that is. It should not be, and as we see now, it has affected other parts of the world as well. It started in the United States, the university students started there, but then it picked up in other countries as well. I think the leftists should also should start regrouping and in order to chart the way forward. Again, it all needs organizing, which there isn't much of it at the moment, unfortunately.
Do you suspect that there's a younger group of people on the continent you can point out, or who are coming up with a greater force, with an interest of recharting the path of prosperity for the continent?
Well, having lived outside Africa for so many years, because I've been living in Europe since 1979.
Yeah.
So I cannot speak with authority of really what is happening in there. Perhaps you people who are there could be the best people to inform us. But as I said earlier, I believe that the seeds are there. They need to be harnessed, to be watered into the plant which we want to produce. So and all this has to be done locally, depending on where people are. I mean, you cannot import these type of things. Things have to come from the ground itself. So I believe that these things will change as long as people get organized.
I have to ask you this question because I mean, of course, we know your legacy is huge, but when the sun goes down, what would you like to be remembered for? What would generations unborn, what do you think they should take out of your legacy as a man, an activist, as a poet, and as a revolutionary, as a Pan-Africanist?
Well, it is that I tried my best to do what I could. I think that's maybe I would like to be remembered for that only, that I tried to do the best I could in order to bring about changes. Yeah.
I am grateful to you, but before I part ways with you, some advice for young people on the continent.
The advice which I would give to the young people is that they should put their countries and their continent first, and work for the better changes for our continent and for our respective countries. So I would like them to have the interest of the continent at heart and work for that. Yeah, that's my advice.
I am most grateful to you that you found time out of your busy schedules to share some nuggets of wisdom and share your story, your ever inspirational story with the rest of us. And this is not only to Ghanaians, or it's basically every young person on the continent, or every person wherever they may be watching this interview from. We are very, very grateful, sir.
And thank you so much for having invited me and thought that I could be of use.
Yes, it was very inspirational. It was illuminating, to say the least.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thank you once again.
Thank you. Yeah, all the best. Yeah.
Well, that's where we tie the nice ribbons on today's edition of These Sages.